I recently marathoned all 24 episodes of Scrapped Princess, and my biggest takeaway from that experience was not any of the show's themes or ideas, nor its narrative or any of its characters for that matter. Rather, what stuck out to me about Scrapped Princess was that it stands as a shining example of why you should marathon anime. I'm fairly certain I would not have enjoyed Scrapped Princess as much as I did had I not marathoned it. Here's the thing about Scrapped Princess. Quality-wise, this show is fairly consistent throughout. That is to say, the opening episodes aren't really that much better or worse technically than the middle or final episodes. The show might not get any better or worse as it goes on, at least not significantly, but it does shift focus and genre drastically, and it's in that shift where most of the meat of Scrapped Princess lies. It's that meat that truly hooked me, but I probably wouldn't have gotten there had I not committed to watching it all at once. Taken in all at once, the early episodes became an exercise in tracking how the show slowly reveals its true nature. And once it had revealed its nature, and I was able to understand what the show was going for, it was, for the most part, smooth sailing from there. Because I marathoned Scrapped Princess, I got to the meat relatively quickly, and was able to enjoy myself. To be clear, I'm not saying this show's meat elevated its quality of writing significantly or anything. It just so happened to align with my tastes more than the impressions the first episode gave. But what if I hadn't marathoned it? What if I had taken it in at a slower pace? Say, one a week, as shows tend to air. Would I have gotten the same experience? Would I have enjoyed myself as much? No. In fact, it's entirely possible I would have lost interest and stopped watching before I fully grasped the appeal. Had I watched it at a slower pace, the less than stellar impressions the first episodes left me with would have stuck with me longer and made me reluctant to return. On top of that, watching it at a slower pace, I would have had a very different interpretation of the opening episodes. I mentioned how, when marathoned, the first episodes became an exercise in tracking how the show slowly shifted genre, or more accurately, slowly revealed its true nature. Viewed week by week, the first episodes would not be that at all. When you watch episodes of any show back to back, it's easier to recall small details from early episodes later down the line, and reinterpret and recontextualize them as necessary. Watching week by week, though, those details wouldn't stick. In Scrapped Princess's case, those small details that hinted at what the show was building toward would have faded, and all I would have been left with was an incomplete and unsatisfying picture. By watching everything at once, I was more easily able to retain those details and understand what the early episodes were doing. So in general, what I'm saying is marathoning shows helps you to better understand them. You'll more easily retain plot and other information through the show's run because you're not giving yourself a week to forget everything between episodes. I know this because my viewing experience of Scrapped Princess was all the better for having marathoned it. I don't make this claim having only tested it with Scrapped Princess. I've marathoned many a show in my time, all with similar results. Just after Scrapped Princess, for example, I marathoned Chaika, which is the same show, more or less. It's a thoroughly okay show, and one I might have fallen behind on had I not watched it all at once. But because I did marathon it, I managed to finish it and have a good enough time. I've marathoned Haruhi, Code Geass, and others, all with similar results. And from those watches, I can say that marathons have the potential to elevate the viewing experience. Though, as much as I now view marathoning as usually the best way to watch your anime, I must admit that I don't think of that as an absolute. For one, not marathoning a show has, at least once, elevated my experience of said show, and for another, marathoning is not always practical. The one time I went hard against the marathon guideline was when I watched what would wind up being one of my favorite shows, K-On! The pace I kept with that show was wholly erratic, sometimes once a week, sometimes once a month, if that. In all, it took me over a year to watch all of K-On!, and for that particular show, watching it at that pace did actually improve my experience of it. That pace worked for this show because K-On! Doesn't have any rigid plot that works the better the more of it you retain as you watch. K-On! Is more about spending time with its characters, and by dragging out my viewing of the show, my time with them lasted longer in the real world, if not in watch time. And since I retained my growing bond with the characters over such a long period of time, it felt like I was, in a sense, growing with them. Because I didn't marathon K-On!, but rather watched it over an extended period of time, I was able to bond more deeply with the characters and form a connection that lasted. If I had experienced all of K-On! In a week, that is to say, if my time with these characters was compressed into a marathon, it's hard to imagine I would still care about them months, let alone years later. But because they were essentially a part of my life for so long, I still look back on my time with K-On! With fondness. So here we have a reasonable counter-argument for whether marathoning shows is a thing you should do. When you don't, you spend more time with the show's characters, and can grow more deeply attached to them as a result. I believe this dragged-out approach works best with character-centric slice-of-life shows like K-On! The goal of these shows is to spend time with their characters. Thus, the more time you spend with them, the better. But for shows more plot-focused, such as Scrapped Princess, that doesn't necessarily apply. When it's more about telling a story than spending as much time with characters as possible, then generally, the more of the story you consume at once, the more of it you'll understand, and the better off you'll be. And then there's the matter of practicality. I do recognize that marathoning is not always realistic. Most of us have jobs or school or other such life commitments that don't leave enough time in the day to sit through several straight hours of cartoons. And well, frankly, there's not much to be done about that. If you don't have the time, you don't have the time. Sometimes quick, disposable entertainment, your mediocre one-a-week light novel adaptations, are all you have time for, which is a shame because even those might not be so tedious if you got it all over with at once. And then there are those shows which are just physically impossible to marathon all of, because, you know, So while marathoning has become my preferred method of consuming anime, I also must admit that usually marathoning isn't the best option, for one reason or another. But thankfully, this is why we have compromises. One of my favorite anime series is the Monogatari series. I've seen almost all of this show through multiple times, and I've only ever utilized two methods in my consumption of it: marathoning and mini-marathoning in chunks. Let's make that easier to say: mini-thoning. Mini-thoning is the compromise. It combines marathoning and slow-paced watching to bring you the best of both worlds. In mini-thoning, instead of only watching one episode or all of them, you watch a set of episodes in one sitting, preferably a set that covers one whole story arc. By doing this, not only do you get to experience whole stories at once and not forget anything important in the time you take in between watching episodes, but you also don't eat up all your time at once just for cartoons. Try it today! I brought up Monogatari because mini-thoning is now my preferred method of viewing that show. Monogatari is conveniently broken up into story arcs that usually range from 2 to 4 episodes. There's one that's 7, but even that one I think can be broken up into 2 and 5. Due to the total length of Monogatari, mini-thoning works both as a way to consume significant chunks of the story at once while still going through it at a reasonable pace. I also bring up Monogatari because that show is just as character-driven as it is plot-driven. These are characters who I value spending time with, and I don't want to spend less time with them because I was too eager to blow through the whole show at once to see where the story went. Since mini-thoning allows me to extend the real-world time I spend watching the show without grinding the pacing to a halt, I get to both spend a lot of time with the characters I love and consume the story at a satisfying pace. I know I just built up the whole mini-thoning thing like it was some grand revelation, but really, I imagine it's already how a lot of people consume their media. They just don't put a name to it. What I'm advocating here is simply for you to be more conscious of the pace with which you consume your anime. Is it plot heavy? Please, watch it all at once. Do you want to spend more time with your favorite characters? Maybe drag it out. Is it Monogatari? Mini-thons are the way to go. There's no one right way to consume every anime, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to get the most out of your viewing experience. Consider what works best for the show you're watching, and maybe you'll have a better time for it. Thanks for sitting through my probably redundant ramblings about cartoons. Feel free to leave a comment or yell at me on Twitter if you have something to say. Believe it or not, I still do enjoy reading things people say at me. I'm in the midst of 2 big video projects right now, first of which, a video on Heart Catch Precure, should be out next month, so look forward to that, and I'll see you later.